Okay, guys, you have by now well begun your fall break, and this is part 5 of chapter 8, and we're gonna go all the way through the end of the Revolution, and all the way up and through our terms of peace. So, just as a reminder, I didn't get a chance to remind you of this today in class. But these Chapter 8 packets are due on Monday. I had said that several times leading up to today, which is Friday. So these packets are going to be due on Monday when you get back. We'll probably be looking at a quiz. I will probably give you a couple of days. There's still a couple things that I'd like to do here in class. We're going to be looking at a quiz then on Wednesday. That Wednesday that we come back from school. I don't think there's anything major on the calendar. Actually, yes, there is. That would be an e-learning day. So we'll probably be looking at Thursday for a quiz, unless I decide to. Probably Thursday. We'll say Thursday right now, tentatively. We might do the quiz on your e-learning day. We might make that your e-learning day assignment. That might be something that I'm willing to compromise on as well. So we can talk about that when you get back. Anyway, we need to get through blow and counter blow and then trudge our way through Yorktown and the end of the war. So in 1780, the French are going to send a commander named Comte de Rochambeau, and he is going to arrive with about 6,000 regular troops. Now, this is going to be a real boost in terms of morale, but there's really not a huge military advantage from the reinforcements from France. It's really just sort of a shot in the arm in terms of gusto, trying to continue on in this war. This is also the time where General Benedict Arnold turns traitor, largely because he felt that he had been passed up far too many times for command post. And now the British also begin their plan of trying to what's called roll the colonies up, meaning we're going to start in the south, the loyalist south, and we're going to try to take control of the colonies sort of in a methodical way up the coastline. So you would begin in what is Georgia, and then move your way up through the Carolinas, move your way up to Virginia, and just kind of roll the colonies that way. And you would start in the south because it is largely a loyalist area. Now, if I can get there we go. Georgia's overrun pretty quickly. Charleston falls in 1780. This, by the way, is about where the movie, the movie, The Patriot, talks about this. This is Lord Cornwallis. The Battle of Cowpens is a historical battle where the Americans are able to defeat the British. The bigger one, though, and yes, the figure from the movie is based on a historical figure. We're not going to spend a ton of time on him right now, though. The bigger one is to talk about General Nathanael Greene, and he during his time in the Carolinas, the biggest thing, and this is highlighted somewhat in the movie, is the strategy of delay. So basically, stand and retreat, stand and retreat, stand and retreat. The whole time Cornwallis has to pursue. And this proves to be exhausting for Cornwallis. And in the process, Greene is able to clear most of the troops out of Georgia and South Carolina, most of your British troops out of Georgia and South Carolina, just by forcing Cornwallis to kind of chase him. He is able to sort of manipulate Cornwallis in a way that he hadn't really expected before. The other thing going on, and this is all going on relatively simultaneously, so we are backtracking a little bit, is the West. 1777 is known as the Bloody Year on the frontier. There's a section of natives that side with the Americans. You see them there, most notably the Iroquois and the Oneidas. The Senecas, the Mohawks, the Cayugas all join with the British. And the reason that these tribes join with the British is that they believe that should Britain win, white expansion into the West is going to be slowed to a much higher degree, which probably would have been correct. 1784, the Iroquois are forced to sign the Treaty of Fort Stanwix, and this is the first of many treaties between the United States and an Indian nation, and they basically give up quite a bit of their land. This is well after the end of the war. We're going to get to all that here in just a minute. Illinois, the British are very, very vulnerable. They don't have a ton of military posts. They've just got a few that they'd captured from the French during the French and Indian Wars. George Rogers Clark comes up with the idea that we're going to seize these forts by surprise, and he does that, quickly capturing Kaskiyeh, Cahokia, and Vincennes. Vincennes is in southern Indiana. It's south of Terre Haute. There's actually a great memorial there if you ever get a chance to go down there and check that out. It wouldn't take you very long to go through it, probably less than a day, but it's a pretty neat memorial to go to, and it just sort of memorializes George Rogers Clark's place, and really kind of Indiana and Illinois, their place in the Revolution as well. Now, we come to the sea. John Paul Jones is going to be the first commander of America's Navy. They never really are able to do anything substantial to the British because the British fleet is just massive. The biggest contribution is they destroy British merchant shipping. So they're going to prevent merchants from coming in and out of the colonies. That is something that's kind of strange to think about, is that there is still trade going on while all of this fighting is taking place here in North America. The American Navy is able to sort of get into British shipping lanes. The British are still trading down in the Caribbean. And so being able to cut the British off from that it is big. It's not maybe as big as what we like to think that it is, because we like to think that we're the best, Navy and armed forces in the world, which we kind of are today. Back then, we were not. Also, these things called privateers. Basically, these are legal pirates, which is kind of something that's cool to think about. And the Continental Congress authorizes them to attack enemy ships on behalf of the new American government, or the American government in infancy. There's about 1,000 privateers. And they're not just in it for, good old, patriotic, trying to throw off the chains of the British oppressors. No. They're also looking for profit. About 70,000 men in all are going to serve on these privateers. And they're going to capture about 600 different British prize vessels. Or maybe not vessels, but 600 prized shipments, which is a lot. And it makes a dent. Again, one of the reasons that we fight this war is because Britain is kind of in some financial trouble, and this whole business of legal piracy does not help that. It does, however, divert manpower, and it also gets Americans involved in, speculation. Grafting would be the practice of sort of bringing, skimming off personal profits away from the loot that you've won for the greater cause. But it was ultimately a good thing. Brought gold, it harasses the enemy, definitely raises morale, and it destroys British shipping. British shippers and manufacturers are really, really ready for this war to be over by the time we get into the late 1770s, early 1780s. 1780 to 1781 is sort of the darkest point for the Americans. Our government basically is bankrupt. We don't even repay all of our debts in full. It's only about 2.5 cents per dollar, which is unheard of. There's a lot of despair. Men in the army are ready to leave at a moment's notice. It's just really, things are not in a good way. But Cornwallis helps us out because he kind of blunders his way into a trap. Much like his operations in the Carolinas, things do not go well for him in Virginia. It's just kind of futile. He's frustrated, and he decides to fall back to Yorktown, which is on Chesapeake Bay. And his basic plan is, I'm going to wait seaborne supplies. He still assumes that Britain is in control of the seas. Again, this is not an era where you have mass communication and quick communication. He still assumes that Britain has controlled the seas, which at this point they are not. The French kind of are. This is the point where Admiral de Grasse informs the Americans that we can make it down to Yorktown. Washington makes a very, very quick march from New York to the Chesapeake, along with Rochambeau's French army, and this is where we see the Battle of Yorktown, which is touched on briefly in the movie. I know you all really like the movie, so I'm trying to reference it as much as appropriate. Cornwallis has to surrender. He has no option. He's completely surrounded by all sides. That was not the end of the war in the minds of the British, especially in the mind of King George. There's fighting that continues for a year after Yorktown, so well into 1782. And probably the most valuable contributions of a guy like Washington is just keeping the cause alive. Because at this point, the army is fed up. The different states are ready to be done. That is probably the biggest success and what Washington deserves the most credit for. Now, peace. In the aftermath, the British citizens are done. They've suffered losses all over the world. Finally, Lord North, the yes man to King George III, has to fold up shop and get out in 1782. And the Whig ministry, which is and has always been favorable to the Americans, they are going to replace those Tories, those old hardliners that would have supported Lord North prior. Now, the American negotiators are good old Ben Franklin, but also John Adams and John Jay. They're going to gather in Paris, and they are instructed to not make a separate peace with anyone, that they are to consult with the French at each stage of the negotiation process. This doesn't work. These three are not willing to do that. They know that the Congress was sort of forced into writing that by the French Foreign Office, and so they're really kind of open to whatever deals can be made. The French are kind of backed into a difficult spot. They had brought Spain into the war, knowing that Spain really kind of wanted that Allegheny region, that Ohio Valley region that everybody was sort of after. Now, France wants an independent United States, but they also want to keep us east of the Alleghenies. They came into this with really kind of a hard position to win at, because they kind of want their cake and eat it too, and that's a bad pun if you know anything about the French Revolution that comes a good 20 years after this. Basically, they want America to be weak so that they can sort of use us as a pawn in her larger global gains, and they're paying a heavy price for it, and they want to get as much as they can out of it. Now, John Jay is sort of noted as the one who's really, really not down with this French gain, and so he does go that unilateral route to London. He makes contact with British emissaries, and they sign a preliminary treaty in 1782, formally recognized in 1783. The gist of it is this: Britain recognizes the independence of what is now the United States, and they are given very generous boundaries to the west, the north, and the south. The American concessions is we are no longer going to persecute loyalists, and Congress would recommend, although not require, that states give back confiscated loyalist property and that they pay debts to their British creditors. The British concessions is that they accept defeat in North America and they end the war, ending a war that allows England to rebuild. So I'm short of time. I'm pretty close to the end of this. Yeah, that's your last slide. I'm not going to have time to get all the way through it, but you can pause here and get the rest of this. I hope you guys have a great fall break, and I'll see you back here on Monday. Have a great one.